Michael Yoder. I finally delved into the OT3 materials with commentary. Besides the bizarre space opera crap, I stumbled over Incident 1 and Incident 2, and that it leads to R6. They read like bad storyboards for an even worse sci fi flick, with cherubs and trumpets, waves of light, chariots, and then terrific winds and thetans and so on. What was the purpose of Incidents 1 and 2 in the Scientology narrative? Do they relate to auditing, or are they just an explanation of what was supposed to have happened 75 billion years ago? And what is R6 all about? Well, Michael, you've asked a question that for me to actually fully answer it would take there's a lot of material on this, but let me bring it down to the simplicity for Scientology here, because it's all just kind of fun and games anyway when it comes to Scientology's mythology. It really does read like a bad sci-fi flick. And trying over the years that I was in Scientology to put it all together into a coherent narrative it was impossible because I didn't even have access to the OT levels when I was in Scientology, but I had full access to all the lower level stuff. And there's a lot of really wild, crazy sci-fi stuff in the lower levels that you can all by itself through history of man, through a lot of bulletins and lectures Hubbard gave or wrote, where he talked about past track incidents, is how he referred to them, or whole track incidents, the things that happened way in the past prior to this lifetime. That's the whole track. Your whole track goes back all the way to as far as you have existence. That's all the memories there. The time track is your current life. Your whole track is all of it. So Hubbard talked about incidents on the whole track. There's even lectures called Principal Incidents on the Whole Track and things like that. None of that's confidential. And Scientologists eat that stuff up. I was so hungry for it. And yet continually felt like I was running into obstacles because I knew that there was this confidential information. So you get a sort of hodgepodge mix. When you throw the OT levels on top of the other stuff that Hubbard wrote or put together, you get this sort of a snapshot of here, and then a snapshot of here, and then a snapshot of here. It's like it's not a continuing narrative. It's more of a collection of musings and ideas and factoids that Hubbard would throw out during his lectures. He never really sat down and said, "Okay, kids, it's story time. Here's where we all came from, and here's what happened next, and then here's what happened, and then here's what happened." None of that. That doesn't exist anywhere in Scientology, which is why putting it all together, I always go on about this because it's just, you got to piece this and then this. And sometimes he's talking about stuff and he doesn't give precise dates. I mean, when he's talking about incidents that are 68 trillion years ago, that's an awful lot of years ago, but he's still only bringing it down to a band of a trillion years. 68 trillion years ago. Okay, well, how many billions of years? How many, millions of years? How many hundreds of thousands? Like, you're trying to bring this down to an incident, which you can then compare to the date of another incident, another one. You see what I mean? It's all over the place. It's confusing as hell. Okay, so given all that background, I set all this up so that I could tell you that it's very difficult for me to tell you exactly what the significance of these incidents are, except that the incident 1 is basically the earliest. It's not actually the earliest incident, but it's because 4 quadrillion years ago, when Hubbard said Incident 1 happened, which is him saying is the entry into the messed universe or the physical universe, this place we all live. Well, if that's true, it actually contradicts, you see, the earlier data just a couple years before, 1964, 63 time period. He's laying out incidents that were supposedly trillions upon trillions of years ago, billions and billions of years ago, trillions and trillions of years ago. So what are you supposed to think about all that, right? It just doesn't, you can't make it work. So we hone in on the OT3 narrative because it's confidential and it's supposed to be very explanatory, the most directly explanatory narrative of why Earth exists the way that it does now. The earlier stuff, there's hints of invasion forces, aliens coming to Earth and invading it, and there's aliens fighting aliens on Mars and Venus and here, and there's a galactic confederation and council, and there's the Markab and all that stuff. But so the incident one sort of it being the later incident on the discovery process, Hubbard would say, right, being the most recent discovery, sort of invalidates some of that earlier stuff and tells you, okay, we said all that before, but actually 4 quadrillion years ago, there it is. That's when we all came into and entered the physical universe with cherubs and horns blowing and all that stuff you're referring to. So in a way, maybe that incident one sort of relegates all the rest of the earlier stuff that contradicts it, at least, onto the trash heap, or forces you to think, well, he must have gotten the dates wrong. And maybe when he said that the gorilla implants, which were supposed to have happened, 75 billion years ago, well, maybe actually that was only, 77 billion years ago. Like that happened right before incident two, which is the Xenu genocide, and that is the 75 billion years ago incident. So, it really, at the end of the day, it's anyone's guess how all this stuff is supposed to go together. Because, like I said, Hubbard never really clarified all of this as one coherent whole piece. And there you go. Oh, yes. Okay. And then the R6 bank you asked about. So the R6, or the R6, you said, what is R6 all about? R6 stands for Routine 6. It was the final set of processes that Hubbard developed in order to tackle the reactive mind and take it apart. There had been a Routine 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, up through 6. 6 had to do with directly dealing with and taking out the reactive mind. And this was all developed at St. Hill in the early to mid 1960s. And so routine 6 is the set of processes that you would use to basically go clear, and that gets you onto the doorstep, into the door, so you can get onto the OT levels, which Hubbard developed after that. So when he ever refers to R6 or the R6 bank, it's just different terminology for the reactive mind, which goes all the way back to Dianetics. And Hubbard had later revisions and ideas about what constituted the reactive mind and how you would tackle it. But the goal was still straight out of Dianetics: get clear by getting rid of the reactive mind. And then what he said later is that opens the door to your OT case, the body Thetan stuff, and the Xenu and all the other stuff. And that's why you need to get onto and through the OT levels as rapidly as possible. So there you go.